Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. As mentioned in the last video, this one up here in the top right, I said I would be testing the remote before making my final decision. Well, I did that and more. While the unboxing and review covered my first impression and all the tech specs, it didn't cover real world tests, and that's why I'm back. This video will go through water, distance, and battery life. I won't give anything away here, but I was honestly surprised at the results of each test. So no more delays, let's go! Alright, let's first cover the issues that I ran into with both remotes. First, the new remote doesn't appear to be able to power on the GoPro if the GoPro has been off for an extended period of time. I'm talking a day or more. Seems I have to first manually turn on the GoPro, then subsequent power commands via the remote work as you would expect. This is not a big deal to me personally, it's just something I experienced, and I experienced it multiple times. With the smart remote, however, I did experience an issue where the remote screen hung on the power icon. I could not get the remote to show status, multiple resets of the remote, and different button combinations did nothing to fix this. The GoPro was still accepting commands from the smart remote, but nothing would show on the remote display. I had to wipe all connections from my GoPro and then repair the smart remote, at which point the remote started displaying camera status information again and working as you would expect. My unboxing video did cover some of the features, but didn't really show the camera interface and options close up. Now, I don't have multiple cameras, so I cannot show the multicam list and cam selection at this time, but that is something the new remote can do. After pairing the new remote, it's nice the remote retains the name of your GoPro. This is visually nice, as well as a functional reason for the multi-camera operation. The display of the new remote, simply put, just better. It's bigger and thus easier to read as you would expect. I experienced no issues with screen visibility or responsiveness with the new remote. A complaint of the new remote, though, is the buttons are rather difficult to press in the sense that they are not forgiving. You have to be center of the button and have a good grip on the remote, as the remote size does no favors in attempts at light button presses. This is a good thing as much as it's negative, because I don't expect any false button pushes if the remote is free floating in a backpack, for example. Now, regarding delay in remote commands, I can say there is none. The longest delay seen probably during initial power on, but after that, it is as if you're pressing the button on your GoPro directly. Navigating menus is easy enough. While the menus are not necessarily deep, the new remote gets the job done. You can power on and power off, start and stop your recordings, change your profile, create highlights during recordings in both video and time-lapse mode, and even change the remote's screen orientation. This is a great new feature and allows for more wearable and placement options of the remote. All that said though, I do wish the screen was backlit. Now, not backlit all the time, but a new button, maybe giving the ability to light up the display in the dark, would be great. Now, I may be alone on this one, but I'm fine that the remote doesn't have live preview. It's better for battery life in my opinion, and there are still means to preview the footage in frame either via the phone's remote app or the GoPro itself. All in all, it's a great remote, and in my opinion, an improvement over the smart remote. Here's a look back at the smart remote. You can immediately tell a difference in display quality. Hats off to the new remote there. Button placement is not a big deal to me, but I can see where some users who do extreme sports and need to quickly push a button while focusing on the task at hand, that will be a much nicer user experience. Overall though, the screen is the main improvement for the new remote. You'd think Bluetooth connectivity as well, but we'll get to that soon. Responsiveness of the smart remote is the same as the new remote. Both remotes had no delay when navigating locally or sending commands to the GoPro. Both performed really well when in range. The new remote simply pulls ahead because of the new display. It is a lot nicer. You have all the same menus and commands on the smart remote as you do the new remote. That includes highlights during video as well. One difference though, as mentioned earlier, is the ability to change the remote screen orientation. You simply can't do that here on the smart remote, and once you see it and get used to it on the new remote, you really start to enjoy that feature. Based on comments in the last video and reviews online, as well as GoPro's own site tech specs themselves, this test kind of surprised me. Both remotes had all functions work when underwater. I watched for air bubbles from both remotes, and there were little, if not none. Also, the dry time on both remotes was very fast. The new remote was slightly quicker due to just simply having less plastic. I wouldn't say this is a thorough underwater performance test. I mean, the GoPro itself wasn't underwater. We're talking maybe 4 to 5 inches deep in this glass bowl. I wouldn't bet a once-in-a-lifetime shot, to a remote and a GoPro if they're both underwater at 10 feet. What this test shows is that if you drop your remote in a puddle, don't panic and scramble. Everything's going to be fine. If it starts raining, yeah, you're good. Just to call it out, even starting with the iPhone 7, they are IP67 rated. So even if you're using your phone for some GoPro water sports, you're going to be fine. Personally, though, I'd still go with the remote anytime water's involved. Okay, the indoor distance test honestly surprised me. Not because of the distance itself, while that did okay, the fact that through walls, doors, insulation, and even flooring, as I had the remote upstairs and the GoPro downstairs, both remotes worked like I was pressing buttons on the GoPro directly. The only bad thing about the indoor test is it really set my expectations for direct sight line during the outdoor test to be a little too high. At conclusion of both those tests, though, I can say there's a common denominator when it comes to the remote range. Just having said that, you can probably guess what the result's going to be for outdoors and what that commonality is. I tape measured the distance from the GoPro and where I was standing. The range measured at 60 feet. This is well within range of the advertised 196 feet for the new remote and the 600 feet for the smart remote. GoPro's site states distance under optimal conditions. My house is anything but that. As already mentioned, the natural home barriers. We also have about 34 Wi Fi devices and counting in the home. Between the phones, the iPads, computers, Nest cameras, Wi Fi controllable outlets, Apple TVs, the list goes on. Electronics traffic is pretty tight in our home. Now, I do split devices across bands and leverage 3 physical wired hubs via Google Nest Wi Fi, which is an amazing mesh Wi Fi, I might add. There's still a lot of devices that could be causing interference, but still, both remotes performed great indoors, no complaints. After the great indoors test, I was excited for the outdoor test. The concept of distance in my head always tends to be longer than when measured. It's something I've come to notice in my years, and this test really proved that. Reading on paper, 196 feet or 600 feet, I was like, man, that's insane. Well, 100 feet really isn't that much in terms of distance. Maybe the camera's built in beep is just freaking loud, but when all the remotes reached their farthest distance, I could still hear the camera, and I could definitely see it. Spoiler alert here, before even getting to the smart remotes test, it performed exactly the same. Maybe, maybe a 10-foot advantage to the smart remote, maybe. But they stopped updating status and sending commands to the camera at the same distance. This test really brought my conclusion to what a remote is meant for. In my opinion, if you set up and mount your camera, you don't want to impact the frame image. You can press a button on the remote without touching your camera, ensuring that your mount is unchanged. If you want to take photos, or maybe you do a lot of talking to the camera, the remote is a great feature for that. Heck, maybe your hands are tied up. Do you want to start recording with your foot? Well, there you go. Head mounted, maybe you have T-Rex arms, right? The remote is a solution. So there's no denying that there are valid use cases. I'm not covering all of them here, but at a price point of $59 to $79, it's better to have a remote and not need it than to need a remote and not have it. As you saw, the new remote's top range in my test was 100 feet. This was the same for the smart remote. And I don't have it featured in a video clip, but the GoPro app on my phone performed the same and tapped out at 100 feet as well. So that's the new remote, the smart remote, and the GoPro phone app all stopping at 100 feet. So can you guess what I meant earlier by common denominator? Well, if you haven't, it's the camera. And before you jump GoPro and call false advertising, though, yeah, slightly it is, if you were to have two cameras at opposite ends, then add those distances together and your coverage is 200 feet. Yeah, that's a joke. So my real world test, 100 feet is the range. At least for what my Hero 8 would put out, and that's across both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Now, is it possible that maybe the remotes can go as far as advertised? I guess who's to say? My GoPro 8 certainly cannot. I did check the GoPro website, and there is no mention of operating ranges with the Hero 8. So there you have it. We've covered functions, water, and distance. Can you guess what my decision is going to be? If you want to take a guess, go ahead and comment now while the smart remote shows its capable range. After this test, we'll take a look at the battery life of just the new remote. There's a really bold hint for you. This test left me scratching my head. Now, prior to the test, I fully charged the camera battery, as well as the remote battery. When I got the remote, the battery was at 75% out of the box, and over the course of a couple days, it only dropped down to 73%. When I charged it up last night, I did leave the remote plugged in for quite a while longer after reaching full charge. I'm not sure what effect this had, if any, but the result of me using the remote for an hour straight of stop-start recording, where I'd take 2 minutes between recordings, and I started off recording only for 2 minutes, and then I increased that up to 5 minutes just to speed things up. Long story short, the GoPro overheated and used up its entire battery, but the remote remained at 100%. I powered off and on the remote a few times, as well as plugged it in to charge, only for it to say it was fully charged and remained at 100%. So I'm going to say awesome, and probably have to follow up in comments here on my battery experience. As of now, again, I checked the remote, it still says 100%, so we'll see.
Can't wait to start the series on the acoustics and root configuration. So for the remote, I decided to go with a remote. The bigger screen, everything else just doesn't compare. You know, had the tests been different, but really everything result-wise was the same. So you got to look at, what are the differences, and that bigger screen, definitely going with that. So I think I've made my decision. I'm still within the 30-day return policy, so I'm going to return the smart remote and keep the new remote.